The stated goal of modern biological artificial intelligence is ambitious: to map and understand human cellular biology well enough to cure, prevent, or manage all disease by the year 2100. To do that, researchers are building massive computational engines capable of modeling the absolute complexity of how our cells divide and mutate. But a computational model is bound by the information you feed it. For an AI to predict human biological outcomes with universal accuracy, its training data must account for the full spectrum of global genetics, environments, and lifestyles. Right now, global health heat maps show a strange anomaly. If you look at East Africa, the region often appears highlighted in yellow, a seemingly low-burden zone for non-communicable metabolic illnesses like hypertension and diabetes. Epidemiologists refer to this as the yellow illusion. It is a statistical mirage. East Africa doesn't actually have low rates of metabolic disease. It has low rates of documented metabolic disease. For decades, international funding and diagnostic infrastructure in the region were engineered almost exclusively to track and combat infectious diseases like HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis. Chronic illnesses were simply left unmonitored. This bar chart from a recent cross-sectional study in rural Western Kenya reveals the true scale of this blind spot. Look at the red section stacked on top. Researchers found an additional 16.7% of the population had completely undiagnosed hypertension, and another 9.1% were living with undiagnosed diabetes. That means well over half of all the actual cases in this region are entirely missing from national health registries. If frontier AI models ingest these empty data fields without correction, they will naturally optimize clinical pathways based strictly on flawed, Eurocentric biology. By leaving these populations out of the foundational training architecture, we run the risk of hardwiring geographic and algorithmic bias directly into the future of global medicine. The engineering fix seems obvious. To correct the models, researchers need to deploy hundreds of community health workers, screen the affected populations, gather the raw biometric data, and upload it to centralized global servers. But doing that is strictly illegal. The unauthorized extraction of sovereign biological assets is expressly prohibited under Kenya's Digital Health Act of 2023. Developing nations are actively legislating against digital colonialism. A citizen's genetic sequence, blood sugar levels, and real-time biometrics are now legally classified as highly sensitive personal data. They are treated with the exact same protective rigor as national security infrastructure. The Kenyan High Court strictly enforces these data levelization laws. Recently, when the global biometric identity project WorldCoin collected data via proprietary hardware, the court ruled the actions unconstitutional and ordered the mandatory, immediate deletion of roughly 300,000 citizen records. This creates a massive global health paradox. The world's most advanced AI requires this raw biological data to learn how to cure human disease. Yet pulling that data across borders to train the AI violates the fundamental legal rights of the very populations it aims to help. Breaking this deadlock requires an inversion of standard cloud computing architecture. If the data cannot legally travel to the AI must physically travel to the data. This is achieved through a technological framework known as federated learning. Instead of aggregating human biology in a single California server, the central global AI model pushes a copy of its base programming down to a localized server, physically sitting inside the host country. During the localized training process, community health workers run screenings, and the raw patient biometrics, blood pressure, anthropometry, glucose levels, are fed directly into the local machine. The model learns from this information, but the original human data points stay trapped behind a strict digital firewall. They enter the server, but never leave the host country's borders. After the processing cycles finish, only the specific mathematical improvements, what engineers call model weights, are encrypted and extracted back to the global network. Looking at this official schematic, you can clearly see the legal firewall separating the localized training loops inside Kenyan borders from the global servers. By converting raw, highly regulated human biology into pure, untraceable mathematics, researchers can finally map these undocumented epidemiological blind spots. They satisfy strict data localization mandates while still successfully upgrading the global AI. But solving the software architecture immediately creates a brutal physical bottleneck. Processing and training enterprise-grade AI models locally requires incredibly dense GPU clusters, and those processors demand an immense, uninterrupted supply of electricity. Standard data centers rely on absolute national grid stability. Attempting to run multi-day federated training loops on an infrastructure prone to rolling blackouts is mathematically impossible. To guarantee uptime, data centers spend even more electricity running chillers to vent that energy into the sky. But here, the heat enters a circular thermodynamic loop. The boiling water is piped out of the servers and channeled into the subterranean heating networks of adjacent agricultural greenhouses. Kenya's high-altitude climate features cold nights that normally make commercial greenhouse heating incredibly expensive. By absorbing the data center's waste heat for free, these localized facilities can easily maintain the stable temperatures required for precision agriculture, producing highly nutrient-dense crops and establishing a local food-as-medicine supply chain. The extreme heat generated by the AI analyzing the region's metabolic disease crisis is captured, piped next door, and used to grow the exact preventative nutrition required to fight it. There is one final layer of utility. These edge nodes are incredibly powerful, but they aren't always running peak federated training loops. When the AI processing rests, there is an immense amount of surplus computational horsepower left sitting idle. That excess capacity is dynamically diverted to clinical education. It powers complex, multi-user augmented reality surgical simulations. Because the server is located directly next to the clinic, the rendering happens with zero perceivable latency, allowing medical students to manipulate high-fidelity holographic anatomy without relying on the national broadband grid. Furthermore, these edge nodes power specialized computer-aided design software, driving industrial-grade, ISO-compliant 3D printers physically located within the facilities. This transforms digital processing power into immediate physical clinical utility. By printing functional medical devices, orthopedic implants, and diagnostic tools directly on site, rural clinics can completely bypass the fragile import supply chains that historically leave them without critical equipment. Project Sovereign integrates strict data sovereignty, decentralized computing, and preventative agriculture into a single closed-loop infrastructure. By turning server heat into nutrition and surplus processing power into surgical tools, the system moves beyond passive data collection. It builds the local clinical capacity needed to address the metabolic crisis the AI is analyzing.